Alrighty, how's it going? Mets and overall baseball fans, thank you guys so much for chiming back in. We got Jack in the chat, the members saying it's a boring day. It has been a boring day. That is always the case for the Mets when they have those rare off days like today, but it does give us a perfect opportunity to break down the upcoming series for the Mets, and that is what will be transpiring in today's show. Breaking down everything that there is to know possibly about the latest matchup for the Mets as they entered their 7th series this year already, this time being the 2nd time against the Philadelphia Phillies. So we'll be deep diving again the key pitching matchups, the key players from both sides that stand out, both statistically and also just when you have a hunch feeling, all that fun stuff, and so much more, along with answering all your comments, questions, and concerns for everybody in the live stream. So everyone here in the live stream right now, thank you guys all so much. I do appreciate it. And for people watching on replay, which I know will be a good portion of you guys, thank you all so much too. Make sure to smash that like and subscribe button. You guys find yourself enjoying this Mets content and help us get a 16K subs for the next short-term goal here on the channel. We just hit 15K. Thank you all so much for that. It really does mean the world to me. But guys, we got a lot to talk about. I'm going to do a quick roll call to everybody in here because thankfully I can actually shout out all you guys, because in the live stream we have lower viewership to start, and again, that's perfectly fine. The draft is in an hour at the time of recording this too. I know that this isn't great timing for people on the live, so I do apologize for that. But I see Jocelyn, Chris, thank you so much for the kind words. Same thing with you, Dolores, Robert, Jose, Mets Nation, Elliot, Justino, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Jack, great member, as I just shouted you out. Jose, Dolores, Cindy, Ocean Girl, Keith, everybody just chiming in. Appreciate every single one of you. But yeah, we got a lot to talk about regarding this series for the Mets, and I got all my notes beside me right now. I'm excited to deep dive them because this is a series for the Mets, again, after winning their 6th straight to start the year. The first time the Mets have done that in their entire history of an organization over the past 60-plus years. Absolutely absurd, the type of start the Mets have been on. And even after, of course, that brutal loss to the Cardinals last night, not just because of, the play, but also everything that transpired with the on-field antics between the Mets and the Cards. Actually, as we're going live right now, an announcement did just come out regarding the repercussions of course, Yon Lopez throwing up high and in to Arenado and him retaliating the way that a normal schmuck would. And in hindsight, we see Joel Sherman just tweet this out a couple minutes ago for people watching right now. MLB gave a 2-game suspension to Nolan Arenado and a 1-game suspension to Genesis Cabrera. Of course, Cabrera, if you guys don't know, the massive, big, towering lefty southpaw in the bullpen for the Cards, who has some nasty stuff. Remember when he pulled down Alonso from the back? Yeah, he gets a 1-game suspension because of that in that scruff. Then Yon Lopez and Taijuan Walker have received fines. Taijuan Walker tweeted out, he's like, this is the first I'm hearing of this. So yeah, they have been fined for what transpired, as did Jack Flaherty, of course, the starting pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals. So that is an update, just so you guys know, regarding the antics that transpired yesterday. In case you're wondering if there would be suspensions, yes, there is, and it starts with Arenado being the biggest one out of them all, rightfully so, getting a 2-game for just acting completely out of line, when in reality, the Cardinals were not the ones truly being victims in this situation, yet them and their entire fan base and organization decided to act that way. I'm not saying literally everyone, but I'm saying the majority from everything that I've seen. So I'm not trying to upset anyone personally here that is, say, a Cardinals fan. But let's get into this series against the Philadelphia Phillies. Shout out everybody just chiming in the stream. Appreciate every single one of you. Anthony Rivera, Subway to Shea, hope you're doing well. Appreciate everyone else coming in. But guys, let's talk about this series for the New York Mets, because it's a big one. The Mets now start a stretch where they'll be playing the Philadelphia Phillies, the Atlanta Braves in a 4-game set, including a doubleheader. And I will be doing an in-game live stream for the first game of that doubleheader, more than likely next week. And then they play the Phillies again. So the Mets have a lot of divisional rival matchups for the next how many games? A good portion. And May is going to be a big test for the Mets after a historic start for the first couple weeks of the season. But as they match up against the Philadelphia Phillies, what have the Phillies done of recent? Well, they're currently 10-10 on the year. They're exactly at 500, and they have won their last series. They swept the Colorado Rockies. Again, it is the Rockies, but let's also keep in mind the Rockies have been off to a pretty solid start this year. So them away, however, away from Coors, good things are not going to happen for them usually. And the Phillies finally broke out from an offensive standpoint far better than they have ever done at this point this season by scoring, yes, 24 runs in the 3-game sweep against the Colorado Rockies in Philly at Citizens Bank Park. So they scored 10 runs the first game, 7 runs the second game, and 7 runs the third game. The bats were finally clicking for them with all those big bombers, of course, and Castellanos, Schwarber, Harper. And even though that Schwarber hasn't been hot yet, he is, of course, a guy that you have to be wary of. And while I don't have him as necessarily a guy that stands out to me right now in this series and the list here, like I did in the first series preview against the Phillies, you always have to keep him in mind because as I'll be breaking down his numbers in a little bit, Schwarber, of course, is one of the worst Mets killers in all baseball, regardless of the fact that he didn't hit once in the entire 3-game set that the Mets had with the Phillies earlier this season. But getting into it, what is the pitching matchup? What are we looking like we're going to have here? Well, let's get into it. Game 1, which is tomorrow night with my man, Shatta Julie, against Tyler McGill's mother. Great friend of mine, great subscriber and member on the channel. But Tyler back on the bump for another great start. I'm expecting great things as usual. Wearing the black jerseys, yes, everything that I have seen has indicated that it looks like the Mets will be wearing their own black jerseys tomorrow, which is what I have on mine right now. This is the DeGrom one. Absolutely love it. Would have liked if they had the blue pinstriping on the ones that they actually put for sale, not just the ones that they had on the field last year. No less, it looks like it will be a Friday night blackout at Citi Field. So electric. Tyler McGill, who's had a tremendous start to the season for the Mets, 3-0 with a 2.35 ERA, is matching up against Aaron Nola. Aaron Nola, who again has been up and down over the past couple years, but more so based on the defense behind him and the lack of luck versus what he can actually bring to the table as a starting pitcher. Let's not forget, Aaron Nola was in the Cy Young race just a couple years ago. He's not far removed from that, but 1-2 on the year with a 3.74 ERA and did surrender 3 earned runs and 3.1 innings pitched against the Mets earlier this season in their first matchup against each other. And then game 2 this Saturday, that'll be Taijuan Walker. Yes, as we spoke about Taijuan Walker is in fact back. Mama Worm, Watermelon AB. All you guys, thank you all so much for chiming in. Be sure to smash that like and subscribe button. Help us get to 100 likes for the first short-term goal here in the stream. Help us get again to 16K subs for the next short-term goal here on the channel. Really do appreciate it. Again, I know that a lot of you guys will be watching this on replay. Appreciate everyone no less being here. But getting into Taijuan Walker, what has he done this year? Not much. He's only pitched 2 innings, but that was 2 perfect innings against the Philadelphia Phillies in Philly again a couple weeks ago. Then he went down because he had that shoulder issue, went on the IL, did some rehab starts, 45, type sim games, and thankfully everything has turned out great. So Taijuan is set to pitch and make his first, hopefully, full start this time against the Phillies, getting a do-over, if you will, this Saturday, matching up against Kyle Gibson. You guys don't remember the Phillies acquired Kyle Gibson at the trade deadline last season, along with veteran right-hand reliever Ian Kennedy. Ian Kennedy now, of course, is with the Diamondbacks. We've seen him a couple times already this season, considering the Mets played the D-backs so much to start this year. But no less, Kyle Gibson, the veteran right-hander, solid numbers to start the year for him with a 2-1 win-loss record at 3.47 ERA. And when he was with the Phillies last season, he did a pretty good job against the New York Mets. So it will be interesting to see how that matchup goes in Citi Field. But game 3 will be the next time you guys see this beautiful face. And I know I'm exaggerating. Look at this ugly schmuck. All jokes aside, somewhat, the Mets next time that, of course, I'll be covering on the channel will be this Sunday. We'll have a post-game show after Game 3, hopefully after a series victory for the Mets, should they have not gone it through the first 2 games, because I will not be available the next 2 days, guys. So don't expect post-games for Friday or Saturday, but we will, of course, be back Sunday when Mad Max Scherzer on the mound facing off against, yes, that being in Mr. Zach Eflin. Scherzer, was he done this year? He's been one of the best, if not the best pitcher in baseball from a starter perspective. 3-0 record with a 1.80 ERA. Really should be 4-0 because he got the win against the Cardinals, even though he didn't technically get the win because the Mets, of course, Trevor May gave up those runs, and the Mets rallied for 5 unanswered runs there in the 9th a couple games ago, which I'm still not over. That was a remarkable performance by the Mets in that game to come back the way they did. But Scherzer has played the Phillies already this season, has played him playing throughout his career, but in 2022, in 5 innings pitched, Scherzer, when he was, a little erratic with his control because he was fully healthy, he said himself he was just trying to get back in the routine of things. Only gave up 1 earned run, however, got in bases loaded jams early in that game. There was even, I'm pretty sure he walked the bases loaded to start that game and got out of it unscathed. Like, he was ridiculous in that matchup against the Phillies in Philly a couple weeks ago when he didn't have his best stuff. So I'm excited for that. Eflin 1-1 on the year for the veteran right-hander with a 3.20 ERA. So ERA-wise, again, not that means everything, but there are some solid numbers, and the Phillies have had a decent start to the year with their rotation, and it hasn't been because of the likes of Ranger Suarez and Zach Wheeler. Surprisingly, those two have been off to poor starts to start this season because of a lack of velo, some health issues, among other things, but No less, this is going to be a fun pitching matchup for the Mets. And as they enter back into Citi Field with the home crowd, let's look at some guys that I truly believe are going to stand out of this series. Again, it's not a guarantee, and just the numbers I'm about to present to you does not guarantee anything either, but it definitely does help give you an idea as to what we could potentially expect. And that starts with Pete Alonso, because as we saw, Big Meat Pete, Polar Bear Pete, Pistol Pete, whatever you want to call him, Pete Alonso's had a very good start to the season, also has some very good numbers, and not just based on pitching matchups, but also based on playing on home and especially night games. So Alonso, of course, in the first series against the Phillies, absolutely killed them. Had a 1 home run, 6 RBIs in those 3 games, including a over 1,000 OPS. So that's already impressive. Let's see if Pete can continue that trend against the Phillies this time at home with that home field advantage, even though Alonso's numbers at Citi Field aren't necessarily drastic with OPS, but the average is high. So against Aaron Nola, he definitely stands out, has a 1,154 OPS and 34 play appearances. Night games this season for Pete Alonso, he has a 275 average and a 701 OPS. That's solid numbers, especially when you look at some other guys that I'll be listing here today. They have some drastic splits between day and night games, and that went in hand with my decision as to who I think will stand out in this one. And that is exactly why you do not see Francisco Lindor on this list. That's a great example right now, because Lindor, he's coming off of his cold streak, 1 0 for 15. That had an RBI single yesterday. Don't be surprised if Lindor has a great series. He for certain can. He's that good of a player. He's this absolute star. But Lindor this year in night games, games that start at 7 or later, he's been piss poor. His numbers are a polar opposite than what they are when he is playing in day games. Lindor, with warmer weather, that is the best Lindor. And of course, Lindor in April, when it's colder out, he doesn't like that. So you can tell early on that Lindor prefers that warmer climate, and that'll give him better success based on the day and night differential. But getting back into Alonso, now we're shifting to Brandon Nimmo. Nimmo, I was going to pick regardless of what certain numbers may tell me, but Nimmo just stands out because of the numbers and everything that else he provides. Being the on-base king that he is, of course, he's just been looking so good. Had a very strong series against the St. Louis Cardinals. Had 2 RBIs yesterday, even though the Mets faltered to them. But 2 home runs, 2 RBIs, and a 1,539 OPS versus the Phillies this year in Citizens Bank Field, be it that for the New York Mets. But Nimmo, if you look at his numbers some further, has an over 1,000 OPS against Aaron Nola, which would be game 1, of course, and 41 play appearances. So good sample size. Has an over 1,000 OPS and only 9 play appearances, smaller sample size against Kyle Gibson. And in night games this season, Brandon Nimmo has thrived. A 333 average and over 1,000 OPS. And at home, 273 average, 701 OPS. Almost identical to Pete Alonso at home too. But point is that between home matchup, pitching matchup, and night games, all these numbers combined truly has me under the impression that Brandon Nimmo will in fact stand out this series outside the eye test. And the eye test tells you that, yeah, Brandon Nimmo is a damn good player. And my third guy to keep an eye on in this series is the red hot, literally burning to the touch, that being in one of the best contact hitters of baseball, in Jeff McNeil. Jeff, who of course is coming off of his worst season of his career between injuries and inconsistencies, a poor plate approach by the Mets coaching staff, not so much just Jeff. He's looking like the Jeff McNeil of old once again. Had a tremendous series against the Cardinals, had a tremendous away trip for the Mets, batted just around 500, a little under that, looked phenomenal, hitting for opposite field, hitting down the line, was the reason in part why the Mets rallied back, of course, in the 9th inning in that first game in St. Louis. And he just has looked so good as of late for the Mets. He's leading the Mets in batting average right now to McNeil. But if you look at his numbers, matchup-wise, Jeff has a just under 800 OPS and 36 play appearances versus Aaron Nola. He has a 1,250 OPS and 8 play appearances, again, small sample size, so it doesn't mean too much, against Kyle Gibson, and has a just under 800 OPS and 24 play appearances against Zach Eflin, which of course will be potentially the tiebreaker if, say, the Mets win and lose a game heading into game 3. Jeff at night this year, thriving as well. Over 1,000 OPS in night games this year for Jeff McNeil versus day games, quite the difference. OPS also is just under 700 at home this year, but he also hasn't played too much at home either, so keep that in mind. But no less, Jeff McNeil has been swinging the bat so well. I mean, I'm so happy for Jeff. I'm so happy he's standing out the way that he has, but he just looks like the Jeff McNeil of old again, and that is really what is sitting well with me. But outside these guys, of course, you can make the arguments for literally everyone in the Mets lab. That's the beauty of it. It's kind of funny because when I'm doing these series previews after every series, It really is just coin flip personal preference because I can go down the list further. Starling Marte has all the right in the world to be in this list too for my personal picks. I just have him out because some things that did stand out to me a little bit about Marte is one, night games. He hasn't necessarily been fantastic this year. Lower average, lower OPS, lower on base. And two, City Field, while he had those home runs and the RBIs, hasn't been anything crazy yet. And Marte, of course, has struggled over the past how many games at the plate, even though that he can make up for it, of course, with his speed on the bags, as long as he's doing the base running properly and his strong defensive play. But Marte in his career in over 50 games against the Philadelphia Phillies has a over 1,000 OPS. So he has really strong numbers. He's been a Phillies killer, but more than anything else, why I didn't have him here is solely in part because he did not do a lick against the Phillies in Citizens Bank Park earlier this season. Now, does that mean much? Of course, it's a small sample size. It doesn't mean too much. But Marte, again, is someone where in a hitter's park like Citizens Bank, early in the season when he was riding a little bit hot, even though he hasn't been fully in sync yet with his game, you would think he would have balled out in that series, but no, he didn't. Not nearly to the same degree of the Alonsos, the McNeils, and of course the Brandon Nimmo's of the world. So you have to keep that in mind. Not so much McNeil because McNeil barely played in that series, but more so because of Nimmo and Alonso. But then let's get into the guys that stand out for the Philadelphia Phillies. But before I do, I want to thank a big donation here, $5 donation. Thank you so much for that, 1,200. Pearson got bombed today. Glad Walker's back. Oh yeah, Cano still sucks. All these things are accurate. I appreciate that donation, no less, 1,200. Thank you so much for that. Hype in the chat for 1,200 for the $5 donation. Hype in the chat to all you guys for being here. Really, really do. Again, appreciate. Help us get to 100 likes for the first short-term goal. Should we have not hit it already? Thank you so much for that. But to quickly answer, yes, David Pearson got absolutely shelled in his first AAA start this year. Why am I not phased at all? It's because the Mets have looked really well with David Pearson when he's been with the Mets this year. I can give a rat's ass, pardon my French, how he does in the minors. This was actually his first AAA start of his career because let's not forget, he moved up from AA all the way to the majors in the Shore in 2020 campaign when he made his debut against the Boston Red Sox. So food for thought there, but not worried about Pearson. I'm happy Taiwan's back, but I expect David again to be a factor for the Mets this year, either, as a starter at times, a long reliever, whatever they need to utilize him as. So far, he has looked great, and I'm not letting the minors situation today impact that whatsoever. But getting into the Philadelphia Phillies now, folks, who stands out? Well, yes, I know I don't have Kyle Schwarber here, and I'll explain why in a second outside of what I already did, but I have Odubel Herrera, Nick Castellanos, and Bryce Harper. Now, probably the biggest elephant in the room is, yes, Odubel Herrera. And no, it's not because of things he's done off the field, which is a discussion for another day. I'm talking about the Odubel Herrera, who only has 14 play appearances so far this season, but he has been a nice spark in that lineup for the Philadelphia Phillies. He's doing a really, really good job since he came back in the lineup because he did not start the season right away with the Phillies. But if you look at his numbers now, what do you get from Odubel Herrera? Again, in only 5 games so far, 15 play appearances, so my mistake. Has himself a 333 average, a 357 on base, a 357 on average, 333 on base, and 1,000 slugging. So he has over 1,300 OPS to start the year. But why I think Herrera might be a pest for the Mets against the Mets in Citi Field is a couple things. One, it's the hot start that Odubel is off of after a hot series against a Rockies team that the Phillies were able to take full advantage of. But two, it's knowing that Odubel Herrera is in the deepest lineup he's ever been in his career with the Philadelphia Phillies. And why is that important? When you have a deep lineup and you have a hitter who is a solid hitter, Herrera had a solid year for the Phillies last year, all things considered, coming back, of course, from his suspension and being away from the game for a bit. But he is someone when you have Bryce Harper, when you have Kyle Schwarber, when you have Nick Castellanos, and all these massive power bats in your lap, and let's not forget JT Realmuto. He can easily rake against the Mets in this series. Wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. But point being is that when you have all these different type bats in your lineup, it can be easy to want to say pitch a certain way to these bigger sluggers and maybe give better pitches to someone like Odubel Herrera. He is going to be able to thrive in this Phillies lineup this year as he has had to start the year because of how truly deep it is. And that's why I can very well see him having a strong series against the New York Mets. I don't wish it. I don't hope it happens. But all I'm saying is that if it does happen, this is in part why. Don't be surprised. And then Nick Castellanos, of course, Nick is off to a very good start this year. Over 300 average, 329, 392 OPS, and 529 slugging. So you're looking right around 900 OPS on the year for Castellanos, including 3 home runs. But Nick stands out too because he had a solid series against the New York Mets. He was the best among himself and the other two big bombers, and Schwarber and Harper. Harper had that opposite field home run that had a very low expected batting average that just got away from Edwin Diaz, and then there really wasn't much other than that. He had one other hit in that series. Him and Schwarber only went 2 for like 22 in that series against the Mets earlier this year. Kyle Schwarber, again, that is the exact reason why I don't have him in here, even though that you can definitely make the argument when he's been the biggest Mets killer out of most hitters in the MLB right now. But Bryce, again, you cannot underestimate Bryce Harper, the reigning NL MVP, to start the year as a 274 average, a 329 on base, and a over 500 slugging, including 3 home runs and 82 play appearances thus far. So Bryce, he has really good numbers against the Mets in his career, as he should. He's been a Mets killer for quite some time now. So keep an eye on them for sure. But this entire Phillies lineup is pesky, and they're finally starting getting the upswing of things offensively now, riding high off of that Rocky series. Because when you look at Gene Segura, very good numbers, especially against these pitching matchups for the Mets. And that also, and I'm glad I'm saying this because it made me remember, Gene Segura, not just him, but Odubel Herrera as well. Small sample sizes, but Odubel Herrera has pretty good numbers against all the starters for the Mets in the series, except for Scherzer. Scherzer's a little bit different because it's really hard to hit off Scherzer. But no less, the entire Phillies lineup is deep. The one that stands out the most to me among their normal starters that I'm probably to the least concerned with, knock on wood, not trying to jinx anything, is Rhys Hoskins. But outside that entire lineup is unbelievably deep. They're finally in the full swing of things, and we can fully expect them to come out swinging big time against the Mets. And I do not expect it to be the same type of series that we saw in Philly a couple weeks ago, now that their bats are finally starting to click and everything's going in full cylinders here. But that's really all you need to know in regards to the matchup-wise, guys. When you're looking for the Mets, there's so many guys that stand out. Starling Marte has been a Phillies killer, but does that mean that he's going to do great in this series? Only time will tell. I hope he does, but that's why, again, I feel Alonso, Nimmo, McNeil, those are my 3 standouts that I expect them to stand out. Not a guarantee, but I do expect him for the Phillies. Again, my expected standouts are the likes of Odubel Herrera, Nick Castellanos, Bryce Harper, and of course, Schwarber. I mean, need I say more? Just for the sake of doing it, let's look up real quick Kyle Schwarber's stats versus the New York Mets. Let's not forget, again, Schwarber did not get 1 hit against the Mets in the first series this year, and that was ridiculous because, I mean, literally, he did nothing but hit and get 10 home runs against the Mets last year. Thankfully, it's been a different start this year at least. But Schwarber, again, in his career against the New York Mets, he has just absolutely killed them for the most part. Let's see here. Okay, the one time that I actually try to look up Schwarber's stats, let me see if I can get it here. Alex Schwarber has a 307 average with 13 home runs, 27 RBIs, and 25 runs scored in only 33 games in his career against the New York Mets. So that's including the Cubs, the Nationals, and the Red Sox, and now the Phillies. But the Phillies, again, he hasn't done anything with them yet against the Mets. So that just, need I say more? Let's just leave it at that. I'm praying the Mets can make Kyle Schwarber look silly once again like they did in the first series. It will be a tall task, even though he's off to a slow start. As long as he's making contact, we all know that ball is going hella far all the way out of Citi Field. But guys, for people on replay, this is where I will be cutting things off. So I hope you guys enjoyed this series preview coverage. Everything that there is to know about this matchup. It's going to be a massive one for people watching live right now. To my 100+ viewers, I'm going to start answering your comments, questions, concerns, whatever you guys have for the next half hour. But again, for people on replay, this is where we'll be cutting things off. So, of course, make sure to smash that like and subscribe button. Again, if you enjoyed this series preview between the Mets and the Phillies, if you're excited for this series, let me know in the comments down below. Which player do you think will be the biggest standout for both the Mets and the Phillies? Again, this is a key matchup, the start of multiple series in a row for the Mets against rivals, that being the Phillies, the Braves, and the Phillies again. A lot of tough games coming up. Let's see how the Mets will do. But, of course, hit those buttons, and thank you so much for watching. For people on live, we'll continue. But for people on replay, this is where we'll cut things off.